a perfectly fine.
Fine. Okay, fine. Fine.
You're listening to Everything is Fine in Southwest Washington, where we recognize that everything is not at all fine, discuss what we can do about it, and empower you to connect with your community.
Hello everyone. I am so excited to have with me today a panel of experts and amazing advocates who have been leading the charge against the mining expansion and heavy industrial railroad plan in Clark County, often colloquially referred to as the Freight Rail Dependent Uses, or FRDU, based on the state law that was successfully lobbied for by Eric Temple in Clark County, allowing for heavy industrial uses of land adjacent to our 33-mile publicly owned shortline railroad. So this episode is Power and Money Part 7. Our previous 6 episodes focused a whole lot on Portland-Vancouver Junction Railroad and Eric Temple's outrageous behavior, lawlessness, election influence, a lot of actions of certain council members, etc. All necessary angles of this story that needed to be told, but today we're really going to dig into the impacts of this plan to the environment, fish, wildlife, water, etc., all things that in turn impact human health, safety, and well-being, of course. So this presentation and discussion will also refresh listeners' memories on PVJR's unpermitted destructive actions in Chelatchie and Barberton. And then after the presentation, we'll have a little follow-up discussion addressing some pro-industry talking points that have been going around, actions the county can take but aren't taking, and we will let you know about what you can do and all of the allied organizations where you can plug in and join the opposition. And then one more thing before I introduce our guests, this is going to be the first ever video release of the podcast and will be uploaded to YouTube so that people can see the visual presentation, but we'll also be releasing this episode normally via audio only. So if you're listening via audio, be sure to go to our social media where we'll have photos for you to view as you're listening along. And so on to the introductions. So John Nanney is a professional program manager with trade licenses as an aircraft mechanic, electronics technician, and project management professional. He's currently living in Chelatchie Prairie and has lived there for the last 8 years. He was raised in Southeast Alaska and worked as a commercial fisherman in the Gulf of Alaska. In 1979, he joined the United States Marine Corps, where he served honorably for 8 years. Once discharged, his career spans high leadership roles at 3 different airlines and currently works as a disaster recovery program manager for a major cancer research hospital in Southern California. The mine and railroad directly impact his retirement property and is of immense concern to him and most of his neighbors. Also, John is the one who put together a wonderful presentation and report about the Chelatchie Bluff Mine and surrounding industrial railroad plan, incorporating tons of research, citations, and expert opinions. Some of those experts whom we also have here with us today. So welcome to the show, John.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And so we also have Jim Byrne. He lives just outside of Ridgefield. He spent 28 years working as a Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife fish biologist. He is still interested in protecting and preserving fish in Clark County, and he was one of the founding members of Friends of Clark County. Hello, Jim.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And next we have Dick Durland, who is a retired federal regional hydrologist and federal policy and programs analyst. Dick is also a board member of Friends of Clark County. Welcome to the show, Dick.
Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Of course. And Karissa Hardy is also here, who many of you may recognize from speaking at Clark County Council meetings, and who is a member of both Friends of Clark County and the local chapter of the Sierra Club. So yes, once again, thank you all for being here, and that's enough for me for now. So I'll let John take it away.
Okay, thank you. And just for ground set here, Karissa is the one that got me involved with this 2.5 years ago. She came out on a little tour. So she's kind of the culprit behind getting me in this thing. So thank you. This is going to concentrate a lot over Chelatchie Prairie and the railroad impact. We're going to talk a little bit about regulations that we rely on to protect our environment and our land up here. We're going to talk about water. We're going to probably talk about water, and we'll probably talk about water because that's really, at the end of the day, one of the biggest concerns that we have out here on several different levels. We'll talk about Chelatchie Bluff industrialization and what that means and how that impacts the water, loop that around. We'll also talk about facts. One of the things that I always like to tell people is that don't trust what I say. Proofread me and double check. All the facts that we've got here are coming out of documentation and scientific research and great experts like Jim and Dick that are here with us today. But never take somebody's word for it, dig into it, because that's exactly what the industry wants you to do. They want you to take their word for it. Trust us. We know the best practice, and that is not a good idea. We'll talk about a small sample of the industry's idea of what best practice looks like. I think that words are one thing, actions speaks volumes, and we'll see what their actions speak. So with further ado, most of everything that we do here is going to be relying on these major 5 regulations. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. But definitely get familiar with them. If you're not familiar with them, the Wilderness Act protects our forests. Chelatchie Prairie happens to be in the St. Helens National Volcanic Monument envelope. Our headquarters is just right over here, about 1,000 yards from me. The Clean Water Act, that's a huge issue for us. And up here is what's brought the EPA involved into the devastation that PVJR did up here. Clean Water Act is directly key in that, as well as the Endangered Species Act, especially with coho and stillhead killing that had occurred up here. And then the 2 final ones, Washington and forest practice and growth management. So to get a general overview of what we're talking about here, the main mine is right up here in Chelatchie Prairie. This is Tum Tum. Anybody that's been up here to Chelatchie knows Mount Tum Tum. So the Chelatchie tributary, it's an unnamed Chelatchie tributary, comes out of the exact mine area. And that tributary in the wintertime goes right in my backyard. It flows at about 3 feet deep by about 5 to 8 feet wide in the summer or in the wintertime. So there's a huge amount of water that comes out of this area. And Chelatchie Creek is very dependent on all of the area of water that comes in through here. On the other side of the mine is another creek called Booty Creek. Booty Creek has just as much activity and water that comes out of it, and it comes down and feeds directly into Cedar Creek. And then Cedar Creek swoops down through Yakult and ties up in Amboy with Chelatchie Creek, and Cedar Creek continues on down out to the Lewis River. This is really important to understand because of the fact that Cedar Creek is considered a major headwater of the Troutdale Aqueduct, which we'll talk about a little bit later. When we look at this watershed characterization and analysis chart from Clark County, it was a final in July of 2009. We see that the Cedar Creek and Chelatchie Creek were both rated as high for Cedar Creek and medium high for importance ranking for the quality of water and the protection level that needs to be put on these creeks. So it's no small thing when you start talking about impacting the headwaters of Cedar Creek and Chelatchie Creek. This is a simple screenshot of the Department of Ecology. This is one of their GIS websites that anybody can get to. It's open to the public. And this just really provides a very good visual of how much water is coming out of ground zero area of the mine. And keep in mind, all these streams are salmon coho salmon and stillhead and other protected species streams. This area is also in the dark green area of the 2008 Stormwater Needs Assessment Program. Dark green meaning that it's protected, this entire area. And that's why whenever you go in a car and you're going up the 503 or you're going up any of the other roads out in this general area, you go across a bridge, usually you'll see a sign off to the right or the left that says, what names the creek, tells you what creek that is you're passing over, a river, and it usually has fish on it, and it's demonstrating that you are in a protected area. Now, this is where it really starts playing for the entire part of Clark County, and we'll see some other slides coming up. But this slide specifically is dealing with the Federal Registry. And the Federal Registry has identified as a final notice of determination that Cedar Creek is absolutely part of an aquifer that you'll hear me referred to as Troutdale Aquifer. And we'll look at the rock formations and the geology of how Cedar Creek and Chelatchie Creek go through the rock formations that are in this area and provide that substrate that allows water from the surface down through into the aquifer area. And it's very important to understand that the aquifer is the Troutdale Aquifer is a major method or a major resource for water in most of the county's private and county wells. So if you know somebody that's on a well, or even if you know somebody that's on city water, there's a possibility, a strong possibility, that the Troutdale Aquifer is involved with that water. So anything that happens at the headwaters of Chelatchie or Cedar Creek will have impact to a very large chunk of the county. One of the things to keep in mind when we talk about aquifers and the rock formations and that type of stuff is that damage that occurs now could take 5, 10, 15 years for that damage, that pollution, that reroute of water to impact other people. There's a very slow migration of water in these aquifers. And if you look across the nation, there's cities and counties dealing with this right now. There was a great news article here just recently about the chemicals in water, I think right in Oregon, where they're now having to fight having these contaminants that are in the water. And a lot of those contaminants did not enter the water just yesterday. It was introduced by industry decades ago. And so this is a long-term discussion or a long-term impact. So this is the rock that I was talking about. Again, this is ground zero. And right in the headwater or right in the head of this main contributor of rock is where they want to put the mine. And of course, we have the streams, both Chelatchie and Cedar Creek coming straight across this. And interestingly, we'll see in a little bit this alluvial fill, just like this wonderful picture right here. They want to dig 750 feet down into this. So they basically want to cut this off when they dig in and allow water to then go vertical. another thing that we need to keep in mind is that blasting, and we'll see this in a little bit, any fracture to that rock allows the water to go a different way. It allows things that currently aren't getting into the water to get into the water. So it's pretty dramatic with what is being suggested here. This is a map straight off of the GIS off of Clark County. This backs up what I was talking about as far as the aquifer. You're seeing the pink is kind of the water flow underground and is all considered critical aquifer. And you can see that I'm not making it up. It's over here as part of the layering information. So when they first introduced the surface mine overlay plan back in 2020, right in the middle of COVID, when they were attempting to sneak it in without anybody noticing, it was 320 acres, and that 320 acres came across here and then came straight down here. This piece over here was not part of that discussion. Also, to be transparent, this little triangle piece over onto the side here, that also already had a surface mine overlay on it, although it's useless on the side of the hill all by itself, so really wasn't much of a threat when most of us moved into this area or as that progressed. So they created the 320 acres. When they did it incorrectly. The FOCC jumped involved and got involved with that and appealed the way that the surface mine overlay was passed. The Growth Management Review Board agreed with the FOCC and said that they needed to get rid of the surface mine overlay. The county decided that they didn't need to obey the law, that illegal was fine, and they proceeded to pass the retention of the surface mine overlay that they had created. So that is in place, but it's being appealed. It's currently at the Washington Superior Court. Most of the briefs and everything have gone back and forth, and we're hoping to hear oral arguments here in the next month or two. In the meantime, one of the things that we feared was that by the reckless process that the county had chosen to take of not doing a environmental study, impact study, EIS or a SEPA, that it was going to invite other industry to jump on board. And interestingly enough, that's exactly what happened. This chunk over here is owned by Synergy LLC, another company. And I have another map here in a second that I'm going to show you. Let's see here. It'll be coming up in a second. So let's move on. Anyways, that's what this is about, is the expansion of Synergy. And we'll talk a little bit more about the entire overlay here in a second. This is a a Google Maps or view. 3D view of the area, kind of gives perspective. Here's Yakult Mine over here. And interestingly, Yakult Mine is 1/4 the size of the mine that they're trying to put in here. So this is a huge mine. You'll also see that we've already got a rock quarry that's down in the that's kind of the eastern end of Chelatchie Prairie that's currently got a permit in for request. They were shut down illegally with the last operator mining illegally. Took the county months to finally put in the stop and desist order after the Department of Ecology really had to write them to get them to do that. The new owner has come in and they're applying for a permit for this piece of property. Need you to keep in mind that we have 3 cleanup DOE designated cleanup sites in the area, all inside of that alluvial layer that is fragile and could be hurt. So keep in mind that stuff being protected in a way by the way the rock formation is. As soon as you start cracking and changing that dynamic, we have a high risk of that contaminant getting into our water. We also have the PVJR mine expansion. It's going in right down in the that's the northern corner. We're looking at this backwards. South is up in this, but it provided the best look. So this one's really noisy, and I highly suggest anybody that can to go online, get the pictures and study this. But this is really the detail of what we're looking at. We have the paper mill, which used to be a huge polluter in the area, that's been shut down for a couple of decades now, and has been a pretty polite neighbor since then, although they still have the cleanup sites that they need to deal with on their property. Next to them, in the red here, this is the new surface mine overlay that's illegally put in place. That's a 375 acres. And then this piece right here was submitted by Synergy to be put on the SMO, and that's all on public record. All of this is in public record, so you can find it. So they put in that request. Interestingly, right next to that is another Synergy piece that we can only expect that they would turn around and do the same thing. And the interesting thing that you can't see here is that this allows a road access on this side from the occult side into the mine. And even if they don't get an SMO, by the fact that they've jumped on board, should shout loudly to anybody that's paying attention that they fully plan on being able to truck gravel out and through Yakult. I think Yakult City is starting to wake up to what's happening, and we're hopeful. And then, of course, we have the PVJR destruction that occurred over here in the illegal road that they added, and have a cease and desist both from the EPA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of Ecology have all called them to carpet. So that's the big one. So Jim Burns is here, and I quoted him. He was a huge help in a lot of my research. As you guys understand from my introduction, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a geologist. I had to rely on experts like Jim and Dick and another gentleman, Al, quite a bit. To keep me straight and steer me when I started going off direction. But they bring a lot to the table, so I'm looking forward to hearing from them today as well. But I think what Jim said here, and I got this from public record, blasting, road construction, heavy truck traffic all contribute to soil instability, and you've heard me talk about that. And the problem is that instability has a high probability of killing fish and destroying eggs. And he goes as far as to say that this will probably be considered a take. I think when we get into this a little further, I think his words have come true. I think they were prophetic, and we'll see that in a few minutes.
Well, all I did was, I knew there were fish up there. I went through the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife record keeping. They have a salmon scape web program, and that shows that there are threatened and endangered coho, chinook, and steelhead in Chelatchie Creek. And then when the railroad did their illegal putting a road in, it was confirmed because they killed a bunch of steelhead and coho in that tributary. So we are waiting for the federal EPA. They have the lead, and I'm fully hopeful that there will be
Yep. Yep. Very good. Thank you. So let's see here. And then, of course, the State Growth Management Hearing Board, I mentioned that they concluded the county failed to conduct an adequate state environmental policy act analysis, or SEPA. And of course, that's what we're fighting at the Supreme Court at this point. And so our fingers are crossed. Going along that same line, this is again, you'll see a lot of the charts I get directly off of the websites. This is the active landslide area and unstable ground that we were talking about. Keep in mind that you have all kinds of little offshoots coming through here for the Chelatchie tributaries. You have Booty Creek that's on this side. All of this brown, dark green, light orange, these are all fragile and easily disturbed areas and could cause slides and so on and so forth. So in the initial phase of the SMO process during public comment, Mr. Isaac Halowitz, he's currently a employee of the state of Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife Southwest region. And I think it's important for us to understand that this is, these are guys and gals that are currently in the position to tell what's right and what's wrong. And in his particular statement here, directly off of public record, the headwaters of Chelatchie and Cedar Creek are documented to have large areas of unstable slopes, and allowing mining activities such as blasting, road construction, deforestation would dramatically increase potential for siltation downstream, resulting in suffocation of juveniles. And I'm going to back up a slide here. What he's talking about is this area right through here. It's substantially understood as unstable and will cause trouble. And we'll see that in a few minutes in real life when we get into best practices. This is riparian habitat area. This is there's a protected turtle, and there's a protected couple other species in this area. And as I tell people, the good news is we only have to worry about the area that's green on this map. And as we can see, it's all green, with a special attention to the darker green areas. But obviously, there's no place inside this mining area that is reasonably available to mine without hurting riparian habitat area. Richard Dryland, who's also here with us, retired federal regional hydrologist. He helped me out tremendously. And when I get to this slide, I like to tell people kind of the story that will connect in a little bit later in the slide presentation. And that is when PVJR first started doing their destruction and putting a road in where a road never existed before. They started killing fish. And I was not that educated on how fish migrate, how they do stream, especially up in the mountains and stuff like that. And I was confronted by a pro industry person that snarkingly said, well, how did the fish get up to that puddle? Because I've seen Chelatchie Creek and it's dry this time of year. What do? Put tennis shoes on and a backpack and hike up there? And it really kind of shows and I don't mean this in a bad way. I think it's human nature, but it shows the naivety of people, because, and I'm pointing at myself, because when I first got the call that the fish were dying, I have to admit that I'm sitting there going, fish? They're in the middle of summer. The stream's dry down there. It can't be fish. this slide, if you've been reading while I've been talking, explains what happens, and that is that fish don't know about summer and winter. They just do their thing. And in the wintertime, when the water starts flowing down to the Chelatchie Creek and Cedar Creek and out to the ocean, the fish don't know it dries up. They swim up those creeks and they get up there to pools and areas that can hold water throughout the summer and keep a certain amount of hydration going and all that kind of stuff. They get up there, they lay their eggs and they die, and their young get born, and in the meantime the stream between the two dry out, but the little guys get to grow up and turn into little fish, and then just in time for the winter time to come, water starts flowing again and they go downstream and the adults go right back upstream. So that's how it works. There's no magic. It's just the way it works. And I think that Dick's outline here really kind of put it to the point. And I don't know, Dick, if you wanted to add anything to that, or
We've working with Fish First and other groups. I've spent over 20 years on that Cedar Creek, Chelatchie Creek watershed. And we've observed just exactly what you described. In fact, on one of the trips on the North Branch of Chelatchie, Jim and I were up there and we actually looked into a bunch of those pools way, way up high. And that's just something that people don't realize, that the recharge of those areas is so critical. If we disturb that recharge, and we'll discuss that in a little bit, then we got problems. And so water is a key factor. In addition to having it in the upper area here, we also have it related to issues down below because of the geological situation that you pointed out. I can go into a discussion now if you want about the downstream impacts, if that's going to be timely for you at this point.
sure. I think that would be just fine. I do have, well, you know what? Let me do this next slide here. Because this slide is of the actual Chelatchie Bluff, the original 375 acre piece. And so I think this will lead in, because you're seeing how in this slide I'm showing Booty Creek, I'm showing all the main tributaries going down to the Chelatchie tributary in this area. I'm showing arrows that are showing the flow, the water flow, the natural downhill water flow. And sure why this thing is not quite working for me here. But if I take the overlay and put the overlay on top of this area, like you're seeing right here, you'll see that the downs all of a sudden become ups. Whoops, man, I'm having trouble with this slide. The downs become ups and the ups become down, and they shove Booty Creek over to the south side of the area. And this, by the way, this overlay that I've got, this is directly out of Granite Construction's permitting, or not permitting, but their SMO original document that they submitted for the SMO overlay. And you can quickly see that it's not even reasonably close to what we want to, what would keep this Booty Creek operating. And you can see also that there's a whole bunch of streams and waterways that are feeding down Chelatchie that also disappear and become non-functional. They're gone. So all of that plays into what Dick was about to talk about. So if you want, I'm thinking if you want to go into that at this point, it might work.
Good. I want to stress just how fragile this watershed is. And earlier you had seen this map that showed that critical aquifer. It's very unique. It's been studied. What happens up there is that in the whole Chelatchie Creek, Cedar Creek watershed, most of the water is high as 70–80%, and I'm talking surface and subsurface flow comes from that upper zone. And this has been researched quite heavily by USGS, US Geological Service, and reported on. And the facts are right there. And they made a special point of bringing that out for that area because that, oops, hard to read backwards. Anyway, that report taken there, everybody can read it now, shows that if you disturb that upper watershed, there's going to be a cumulative effect situation set up of very high risk of Cedar Creek and Chelatchie Creek losing its surface water, but just as important and maybe more important, the groundwater system is all going to be damaged because that water will not be delivered to the fisheries downstream, and it will not be delivered to the homeowners down there. There are over 50-something wells associated with that area downstream. This is all documentation by the Washington Department of Ecology. Disturbing that upper area that has such a high yield cuts off the flow down below. That means you're not going to get recharged for 50+ occupants. You're going to have about 23 miles of fisheries. That's got a huge impact, and it may be quicker than later because of the uniqueness of the way water is transmitted not only into the Troutdale downward, but across this unique aquifer in itself. And that's already been laid out very carefully by the US Geological Service. So if you get 50+ people losing their wells, and replacement of a well can run anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 if they can find water in the recharge area that was depleted or go down deeper. That's going to be one heck of a impact. So it's not just the immediate area around Chelatchie Prairie, it's downstream all the way down to the North Fork of the Lewis River system. And also those fisheries help support in part the fisheries that get in farther down in the Columbia course. And there's a big push now saying from the report by Bonneville Power that it's these tributaries that keep the Columbia River going. And they spent a lot of money on that report, and they're very concerned about protecting these tributary streams. So we've got a high risk situation here, and it's well documented. Any other questions? This ties in very closely to what Jim said.
Yep.
And what the data shows. And that's been completely ignored. You start mining in there or a couple of 100 feet, you've just destroyed that whole system of delivery.
Yeah.
And that's an irreplaceable situation. You cannot mitigate that.
Yeah. And it's shocking when we get a little bit further along here, we'll see how and this is just the 375 acre piece. And we already know that Synergy and other like-minded companies in the area are going to want to jump on board. It's going to get a lot bigger and much more than the 112 million cubic yards of material that they want to pull. So Al O'Connor is also a civil engineer geologist. He's one of the guys that also has helped me out quite a bit. He did some research for me. I'd asked some questions from him and did some research, called out to some local experts as well. And this ties into the next step of what we're going to be talking about, and that is the mine itself, which is how much material, how devastating this single 375 piece of land is really going to be. And he took a look at the report that Granite had submitted. And first of all, they never had it analyzed by a certified lab. So take that for what it is. They did 2 bore holes only, which Al felt that that was not sufficient to really understand what they had out there of holy. But out of those 2 drill holes, there's 17 feet in one hole and 23 feet in the other hole of overburden. And overburden, for those not familiar with that term, that's the material that's got to be removed from the land first in order to get to the bounty of what they're after, the rock that they're after. And that's a huge amount of material. 17 feet to 23 feet is huge amount. Most mines won't even consider something that's at 15 feet worth of overburden, according to what Al has provided me. So right off the bat, it's insane that we're even having this conversation. Additionally, with the very report that they provided us, it showed us that there was an additional 15 to 30 feet thick of material that probably is not sellable real material. It's rock, but it's not the real good rock. It's weathered rock. And so if you include that, we're up to almost 53 feet of overburden before you can even get busy taking out the rock that they're hungry for. It just doesn't make sense. And the next slide, and I have a little quote here where the Santosh quarry, they don't play with anything over 5 feet of overburden. That's an active mine in our area. So it's clear that 17 to 23 is really an outrageous number. So when you go to their report and you look at the line, now the red line, this is right off their report. This is the area they want to mine. They in their report specifically say that they've got 8 million cubic yards of anticipated overburden. And then you come over here and you look at the mine that they've got, you have to ask the question, where is the overburden pile going? There's no place for it. So this whole thing is ludicrous. They want to dig 720 feet deep into the ground. We've already looked at the fact that 720 feet is directly into the water table of this entire area. It obliterates Booty Creek. It goes away. It's gone. And it pretty much dries out Chelatchie tributary. And all in the idea of getting 112 million cubic yards of material out of this area. And the hole that they've got to dig is incredible. Oh, see next. Additionally, one of the things that we don't hear a lot of talk about is the archaeological area impact. The local tribes, the Cowlitz Indian tribe, wrote a very nice, strongly worded letter to the county about the 320 acre, highly against it due to their ancestral connection to the Chelatchie Prairie, to Tum Tum, and to this area. And it's recognized that this is an archaeological area. Anybody that builds in this area has to observe the rules and requirements. When I laid the foundation for my house, we had to have some, constant inspection to make sure that we weren't disturbing or running into any type of artifacts or anything like that. And if we had have ran into artifacts, we would have had to been full stop. So it's absolutely important that we keep that piece of the puzzle in front of us as well. So let's talk about a myth. We're running out of gravel. So that is, whenever you hear an industry person talk about the fact that we're running out of gravel, we've got 7 years, maybe 10, by golly, in 20 years, we're out of gravel, we're out of Schlitz. Understand that they are basing that entire argument on one industry prepared study. There's only one study out there made, paid for by the industry to have that argument. As my old college, as an old college uh, professor once said, uh, statistics are wonderful. Tell me what you want for an argument and I'll create it for you. And that's what this study is all about. They wanted to create an argument that we're running out of gravel. That's what the argument provides. Unfortunately, the Department of Natural Resources DNR website itself says there's approximately 870 active permitted aggregate mines in the state of Washington. Interestingly, the state of Washington produces $670 million of aggregate and represents 2% of aggregate production for the entire country. That's how much aggregate we have in this state alone. 2%. Seems like a small number, but it's not. That when you think about it, compared to the entire United States, Washington state carries 2% of that. We have gravel. We have gravel here in the state, and those numbers of 875 does not include all of the gravel that's on the south side of the Columbian River, which is easy enough to bring up. I know for a fact because I bought some truckloads of gravel from Oregon last summer. Who wins? Well, it's obvious who wins. The out-of-state, international, foreign registered corporations are the ones that win. I really want to iterate foreign limited liability company. This is not your mom and pop aggregate company coming in to try to make their American dream come true. These are big conglomerates, big money, and that's what we're up against when it comes to the fight. Friends of Clark County has a lawyer with some extra help, and that's what Friends of Clark County's fighting with. These guys have teams of lawyers that are fighting us. And so we as citizens have to be extremely loud. We need to be extremely forceful because that's the only way we're going to be able to beat what we're looking at here. Economic studies. We've asked the county to provide an economic study, and they've balked at that in every time we've asked for it. There is nothing. When they tell you that it's going to bring in jobs, when they tell you that it's going to bring in revenue and tax revenue and all that kind of stuff, they are speaking out the side of their mouths. There's no facts. There's nothing to back that information up. And when we've asked for that to be done, they've balked at it. And I got to tell you, when somebody balks at something that would prove their point, if they're true, and they balk at it, it says to me that it wouldn't prove their point, and therefore they don't want to do the study. So, do we believe industry? They're going to do everything best practice. They're here for the environment. They're going to be great neighbors. They're going to do all those wonderful things. The housing, my house that's 500 feet from the rail station and 1,000 feet from the new gravel mine, it's going to double in equity as soon as that thing goes in operation. It's definitely not going to go away, right? It's not going to hurt my housing prices, right? Ask industry, they'll tell you that. So this is a good example. As I started the presentation out with, there's words and then there's actions. Here's Portland Vancouver Railroad. This is down by Curtin Creek. This is what it looked like before. This is what they consider best practice. This is up here in Chelatchie. This is where the road that they say they were just improving. And as you can see, there is no road. And you can, I'll show you some additional information that proves this out even further. There is no road. There's never been a road there. And this is the road that they put in. Interestingly, in this picture, you can see some marking right here, this is where water flows. Normally, water flows right down through here, and you see that it's completely blocked by their new road. There's another stream that comes down here. It's completely blocked. And then back in the woods, there's another stream. And we'll see that in a little bit. So this is what industry wants us to believe is best practice. By the way, when they put this road in, they hadn't even called an engineer to get an opinion. They just put the road in. Early on, I point blank asked the landowner if they had at least something on a napkin or something at a at a luncheon or something that designed and figured out what they needed for culverts. They didn't even put in culverts. It was the neighbor that said, "Hey, you're drying up the land," and then they put the culvert in. And then they changed their tune and said they needed to put the road in first to see where the culverts needed to go. And this is in summertime when the water up in that area was not running very swiftly, so kind of silly. So based on these two wonderful pieces of work, this is where the Environmental Protection Agency, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, the National Marine Fisheries Services, Washington Department of Ecology, and the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife all came down on top of Portland, Vancouver's Junction Railroad's head and said, "You guys have totally misstepped. You're doing this unpermitted. You're doing this completely wrong. You're destroying our water. You're allowing contaminants into our water." And they issued a cease and desist. These letters are readily available for viewing. They're part of public record now. So a really cool thing that the national DNR, National Resource website provides us is a thing called LIDAR. And LIDAR is a really cool radar type thing. That's thus the DAR part of the LIDAR. And what it does, it strips away all the vegetation. It takes away everything to where you're actually down to the ground. You're looking at the dirt through everything. Houses, buildings, barns, everything disappears. You see the dirt. And so when you look at this LIDAR picture, this is the area that we were just looking at. This is this area right here where the road was put in by PVJR. So you look at this LIDAR and you can see, first thing, here's what a road comes out looking like in the LIDAR. You can see a distinct road there. You can see the driveways here for roads here, and you can take those as examples and you look across here and there's absolutely no reference of any type of road ever being in this position. Additionally, you can see the creek and water flow lines for the major water, and I pointed out the one route that was visible in the other slide. So these are major streams in the wintertime, especially. The landowner up here even told me about the fact that he was real glad that the DNR inspectors, when he built a road that comes up and across to his property, and he had originally put a culvert to allow this main stream through, and they had made him increase it to a 3 or a 4 foot round culvert to handle the water. And this last winter, he was saying to me that he was really glad that they put in that larger 3 or 4 foot size culvert up there, because otherwise he would have lost his driveway. So that gives you an idea of how much water flows down through this entire area. And this area right here, this is a railroad track going along. This is the area that got impacted. This entire stream had puddles. I don't want to call them puddles, pools of water that the fish lived in on this side, on the north side of the railroad track. And by them building this road across this area, plugged up this water flow and stopped the water flow underneath the tracks and into that area. And this is where the fish were dying. So this is on the north side of the track. So what these pictures are is right in this area right here. And this is the current landowner and some points of interest. Normally these little culverts during the summertime, in the driest of summer, they're running 3 to 4 times the amount of water you see trickling out of here right now. This is right after the damage was being done that this picture was taken. You can still see that the water is somewhat clear, but it soon turns into muck. You see some dead fish here that they took pictures. This is a different angle of this particular pool a day or so later, and you can see it just turned into complete mud and started killing the fish. And this gives you an idea how much water is rushing down through this thing in an average winter. This was not an abnormal winter. This was an average winter when this picture was taken. And so it gives plenty of opportunity for big fish to come up, and they like this pool. And the other pools, there's several other little pools that are along this area. Up towards the north end of their property is where it dries out and gets blocked from Chelatchie tributaries. This fish in the lower corner, he actually caught that fish out of this exact stream. So that shows the size of fish that are actually swimming up here. It's a real deal. Wow, I just killed it. I think that was it. Let me double check. Yep, that was it. So yeah. So that's the end of the presentation.
Well, I know John did have a slide, but I asked him to get rid of it about questions. Is there any questions or things we want to add to what John presented here? I do have a couple follow-up discussion points, but anybody? Dick?
I was thinking, and maybe you've already done this, put a 5 or 6 of the critical points that you're trying to get across through this PowerPoint, you know, to just remind folks that here's where the problems are, and without it just lists them, you know, like we've got the fisheries in the water. The other thing, I'd like to see us put a little more emphasis on the fact that it's now economically feasible to ship high quality gravel down from the Columbia Gorge area on the high terraces where there's very little environmental impact. They've been barging it down. They're using it over in Portland. It's an economically ongoing process. And I think, you know, these other groups don't like to hear that, but that's competition. And it also is reducing the risk of having to go into environmental sensitive areas. So that gets at this gravel shortage again too. And this is very high quality gravel because it's off the Missoula flood, which is a lot of round material. And Alcona really made a big point of that. So we might want to juice that up a little bit, point that out.
So to follow up with what Dick was saying, there's a big fish quarry, an open pit located at the Dow's Port, and there's the Pacific Northwest Aggregate Company at Wishram. So that's 2 pits right in the Columbia River Gorge, and that gravel can be put on barges and brought down to the Port of Vancouver. So the idea that there's absolutely no gravel and Clark County's running out of gravel, I don't believe it.
Teresa?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, John.
No, go ahead.
John started off this presentation by saying he's going to talk about water, water, and water. And as you can see, and if you've been listening carefully, it has been a lot about water. Water is so important. It's tied into climate. So much of this is tied into climate and the issues of climate. The county is just beginning to start its climate advisory board and looking at how we can integrate housing and so many other aspects of what's happening in the county. And water, wetlands, critical areas, our fish, all of this are so tied into that. There's two other parts of this that we haven't kind of delved into much, but it's a lack we see in the county, and that's no matter what comes forward, we have lack of monitoring and enforcement. So even when we see industry and or these mining companies say what they're going to do and what they're going to promise us, we don't see the county monitoring and enforcing it. So it's a double whammy for a lot of what's going on.
Not only that, Teresa, but we see just the opposite, right? I mean, we take a look at what happened with the Presto Homes mine, the old Chelatchie gravel quarry. The owner before Presto Homes, I want to make that clear, it wasn't Presto Homes, but it was the owner before them, was operating that mine completely unpermitted, illegally. And the county was told about it, provided evidence, pictorial evidence from a state agency, and ignored that for months. So, you know, that you're absolutely spot on, Teresa, when you bring that up. That's been one of my biggest fears, is that these industries, they come in, number one, they try to tell you they're going to be great neighbors and they're going to do all this wonderful stuff, but there's nobody there that's given us a warm fuzzy feeling that they're going to actually defend us and protect us. And in fact, they're doing our county, Clark County, is doing everything they can to prove just the opposite. Point in case, one of the times I was thinking of taking to the county council, get a statue of Miss Liberty and bring it in there and set it on the counter in front of them, and point out the fact that her eyes are blindfolded, and their job as the county is to be Miss Liberty. They don't. What's the rules? What's the laws? What's the regulations? And make sure we're following things properly, doing it the correct way. But what do we have instead? We have the county joining Granite and BRP and suing together to put an illegal SMO that hasn't gone through an EIS or a SEPA. So actions speak louder than words. They can tell you, the county can tell you all day long that they're here to protect us, that they're on our side, that they're about their constituencies and their citizens. What are their actions? What are they doing? Well, what they're doing is supporting out-of-state, multi-billion-dollar foreign registered corporations over the local citizens. And one of the things that I've suggested, tongue in cheek in a way, is if we go back to 2020 and we go and we get the mailing list of all the landowners that were notified about the upcoming SMO, let's take that mailing list and let's have everybody on that mailing list vote whether the SMO is put in place or not. Seems fair. If that was the group of people that they felt needed to know about the SMO, then that's the people that ought to have the say. And let's just do it the good old fashioned democratic way. Have us vote for it. Let's solve this problem right now. Never do it. And the reason is they know darn well that every single one, well, not every single one, but the majority of those people that receive the notice are going to say no. And democratic society, it would be a super majority, in my opinion.
We have a majority of council members who are willing to sell out our land and our water. They're willing to allow mining to overlays to forests. They're willing to allow overlays across our ag land, to allow heavy industrial. we have a fight on our hands against some of the members of the council.
Yeah, and obviously we've talked about how there are claims that this is like somehow an environmentally positive plan. And I kind of just want to go back to that. And Teresa, you talked about climate. And this is what we're hearing. And this was actually part of Eric Temple's whole manifesto, is what we called it here on the podcast, where he was justifying his plans for the destruction of the Chelatchie Yard. It's also being repeated, parroted by Council Chair Gary Medvicky. And now we've heard it repeated recently too, at a public forum, I believe, that this whole mining rock to rail plan is somehow like a climate solution, a climate like emissions reduction goal or solution, because okay, the rock is going to go to the Columbia crossing, and that's going to have light rail, and well, otherwise the rock's going to go on these diesel trucks, and so we need the railroad to do all of this. And yeah, I guess I just want to address that a little further. Like that is ridiculous. That's assuming that that's assuming that the mine is a given and that we even need it in the first place. And John, you showed on those pictures, I mean, that whole there's the 330 acres and then all these other proposals, and that's all forest. It's all forest land. Forests sequester carbon. This is crazy. Don't let people lie to you. And we have to combat this, because I mean, Gary Medvicky, any chance he gets, he keeps making this argument, and it's ridiculous.
And the interesting thing is when you call him on the argument, he suddenly becomes mute. I've had several email exchanges with him and said, all I'm asking for is data, right? Prove what you're talking about. Where are you getting those numbers? And his innuendos and his snarky, condescending discussions suddenly he stops communicating at that point. He likes to throw the talking points out there, and he likes to make it sound really good and fluffy. And with his background, he can do the talk, but show me. You've seen the data that I provided, and you've heard the data from Dick and Jim and others. We don't say, hey, there's a geological issue here, and then somebody says, well, where's the data? And we stop talking. We pull the reports out. I have a bibliography of 85 reports that back up what we have from experts in every field, and he can't provide one to his talking points. And so, yeah, people just need to understand and make sure we got elections coming up here. Make sure we're asking the right question of the people that are going to be running on those two chairs that are coming up.
I'd like to also reiterate what John has brought up, and that's the whole thing of jobs and the economics of this. That's being pushed as a reason to go forward with this, but generate are not the kinds of jobs we're looking to have in Clark County. The middle housing option just passed, and within that middle housing option, none of those middle housing options will be available to anyone making less than 100% to 120% of the AMI. So that's someone making $80,000 a year. So why are we bringing in, or why have we proposed any of the jobs that they're trying to sell to us?
Yeah, and I mean, on top of, oh, I'm sorry, are you talking, Jim? Did I interrupt you?
I just wanted to add, they talked about, okay, there's going to be all these good things come when they do the bridge across the Columbia and all that. Those are secondary benefits. No analysis where it's a corporate or government can include those secondary benefits. It's either a direct benefit or associated costs, but no secondary benefits to the decision to go or no go. And yet that's what they're really doing a big stretch. The other thing, John, if you're wanting to get some backup on the lack of enforcement of rules and regulations and so forth, which is driving all of us up the wall. When Mitch Nichols left, he was in charge of enforcement and he was doing a fairly good job. He had started on stuff and then they shut him down. He just left. And he had two memos written to the county, and internal memos, and we have them. And I'll tell you, that really just reinforces what you said, John, about how they approach things. They didn't want compliance. And he didn't waste any words. He went all the way through on everything. So we'll get those memos to you if you want to look at them.
Jim?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yep.
I'd like to follow up on the railroads and the environmental damage that they did. So they violated federal law, state law, and county law. And the county is waiting for the Federal Environmental Protection Agency before they will act. Why is that? They violated county ordinances, at least 3. They built the road, they cut down trees, and they ruined wetlands. But we don't need to wait for the federal government. County commissioners, county staff wrote those ordinances, they voted them into action, so now it's time to enforce them. There's been a huge series of lack of enforcement actions on the county. And a lot of the existing gravel mines, conditional use permits were put in place on their operations, and they're constantly violated and nothing gets done. So the county needs to handle that enforcement issue.
So yeah, I mean, this touches on what the county can do. Their hands aren't tied. Eric Temple's not in charge. Yeah, they could enforce their own ordinances. Of course, they could stop moving forward with implementing the FRDU as they're doing. As John said, they don't have to participate in this appeal, probably using taxpayer funds, right? Alongside the corporation, the Granite Corporation. I mean, that is insane. And they could stop these things tomorrow. They could enforce their ordinances tomorrow. They could stop with the FRDU. They could change course on the SMO. You know, right now it just feels like they've kind of taken the line. We're waiting for the state and federal agencies, and then we'll deal with the terminating the lease with Eric Temple. But it's like, no, there's actually things you could do right now. You don't have to wait for those things. And the FRDU and the poor decisions that the county is making is what is causing all this to happen. They are the ones that are supposed to protect us from people like Temple. And they're choosing not to. Yeah, and yeah, I guess this gets into, I mean, why are they choosing not to? I kind of want to talk about the community opposition here. So yeah, we've got 3 counselors. Gary Medvigey is the ringleader in support of the FRDU and the mining expansion plan. And, you know, Gary, at a recent Clark County Council meeting, he took it upon himself to respond to a citizen asking for a cost benefit analysis in his public comment. He said, of course, oh so condescendingly, as he does, we're not doing this in a vacuum. So
he's got an interesting idea what a vacuum is then, because
yeah, exactly. Because all over the place, I mean, all we see is very loud, persistent, undeniable public outcry against this project. whenever there's so much as a whiff of an agenda item relating to the FRDU, people are showing up, they are testifying, they are constantly opposing this. And how many organizations do we have now that are like very much focused on this issue? We've got Friends of Central Vancouver, who are residents in the Brush Prairie area. They formed in opposition to the Knife River concrete batch plant, which led to the discovering of all this FRDU stuff. We've got the Coalition for Sustainable Land Management, whose mission is responsible land use decisions, but whose focus is almost entirely on opposing the FRDU. We've got all the neighborhood associations against it, right?
The city battlegrounds against it.
Yeah,
Chime in.
yeah, Battleground City Council just passed a formal resolution against it. Mayor of Yakult is speaking out. I mean, is there something I'm missing? Well, there's John's group. There's the Stop the Chelatchie Bluff Mine. Teresa, you're on mute, Teresa.
There's Wendy Cleveland, who is the chair of the conservation for the Sierra Club, and she, along with Mark Lead, who's the president, and Jeff Cox, another resident of the county, have been conducting forums around the county, especially in areas where people will be, their homes will be really impacted because they're so close to the railroad. As Jim said, the city of Battleground has adopted a resolution to stop it. We've gone to the school board, and we think they're maybe going to draft a letter. At the last forum, Greg Cheney, we had legislatures show up. Greg Cheney, Stephanie McClintock, Monica Stonier, and Sharon Wiley all showed up to learn more about this. So this movement is growing.
Yeah, and then we've touched on Friends of Clark County. You know, they've got a bunch of followers. They're opposing this. I mean, there is a ton of groups, a ton of people opposing this. So yeah, I mean, the council is actually doing this in a vacuum without the consent of the governed, for sure.
In his presentation, John showed two critical areas maps. One, the landslide areas, and the other was fish and wildlife habitat areas. They come directly from the county's own website. The county's own GIS department puts that out. So the county is totally ignoring, the councilors appear to be ignoring the information that their staff has put together. And that's pretty reprehensible.
And why are they doing that? That's the big question, but that's for a whole nother podcast episode, I suppose.
I think there's a saying that says follow the money.
Yeah, exactly. So if we're ready for this point, we can tell listeners how they can get involved. That sounds good to you guys?
That sounds great.
So John, I know you said you've got a fact sheet that you can provide for folks if they email you, so we can provide your email in the show notes. I can also link to Friends of Clark County's website because we've posted that report that you put together there. John has also got the Facebook group, Stop the Chelatchie Bluff Mine. Sierra Club's got a Facebook. People can find a lot of FRDU updates and info at Friends of Clark County's Facebook and Instagram. I can link all the other orgs that I cited who are allied in opposition against the FRDU as well. But yeah, generally we need people to study the facts, inform neighbors, friends, family about how this plan will impact all of us. The great thing about what we're doing here right now is this is going to be uploaded to YouTube. It's going to be an easy shareable link. There's also forums that are going on that FOCV is putting on, and Sierra Club, as Teresa brought up. I'm sure there's going to be more of those. So you can find out about all that stuff. And we just need people to constantly be showing up to council meetings and speaking out, writing the council, writing letters to the editor of the Columbian and the Reflector. Is there anything else you guys would like to add about what people can do?
watch the candidates this time around. We've got several changing out. Find out what they're after. Make sure that they have our well-being, our economy, our environment, our forests, our fish in mind when they're moving. When they're talking, drill them, ask them the questions, ask them the hard questions. We need people that understand that we're protecting our children. What we're doing is for our children. So it's important.
Exactly. Ask the candidates about the mine and about the railroad and what their vision for the future of our kids and grandkids will be.
And check their campaign donations.